fingernails chipped the frosting, remains of the Entenmann's cheesecake, strudel out of the kitchen table joints. She looked down to her left gym shoe and then to her right, and my eyes followed suit. This might have been time to say, I haven't forgotten either, Ma. It wasn't your fault. But in truth, I believed it partially was. She had to have known anyone, priest and God included, could go off script. I am shoulder. I am arm. I am beheaded. I am veil. On my last visit to Chicago, the one prior to my Rome mission, I stole that wedding album. It was my intent to add in the wedding photos of Richard of me on its empty pages. But despite my desire, I couldn't replace the lack of me. On close inspection, my all-out absence or partial presence fascinated me even more. When total obliteration would have ruined a lovely shot, I saw she chose to leave bits and pieces of me in place. On page 3, in the photo of my sister riding in the horse-drawn carriage to church, I'm the cathedral-length veil sitting next to her. On page 8, I'm the decapitated bride in a tight-bodiced white silk gown, standing on Passionist monastery steps, behind the bride, complete with head. And in the shot that would have made the family portrait wall, but for the unfortunate circumstance of 2 full brides, I'm the bare left shoulder and embracing arm, peeking out from where we all gather. Teresa, Tim, Julie, Joyce, Carol, Maureen, and partial me sing us like we are an octave rising. We're next to a light post with a sign reading the Nockels. Dad had installed it on our front lawn too many years ago to remember, and that bare left shoulder and embracing arm are cradling an old and graying buck. I know for sure I would have been excised altogether if my mother didn't have the good sense to keep the family dog, even the one she tried to give away. I once told this story about the wedding album to a friend of mine named Judith. When I finished, she asked me if my mother and I still spoke. Of course we do, I muttered. I mean, this is nothing. Judith raised her eyebrows and pursed her lips, looking at me as if I was in denial. So how to explain? If I were to follow my mother's example, I would do so by extraction, removing from an otherwise pleasing life the pieces that don't fit. Snip, snip, gone, finished, just for that moment. And then, perhaps, if we are lucky, for a lifetime. For here is what she seeks. A time when daughters don't cry over ex-husbands, a calendar month when dogs don't jump fences, and 3 years in which her own son. I was fairly sure this was how she did it, not thinking even once of another man whose name, like my ex-husband's, she had purposely forgotten, the one who in priestly white and gold married her daughters to their betrothed father, John Baptist Ormachet. That's why I know if he had been in even one background shot, one sparkle of an eye, one slimy hand reaching out, one thumb, one fingernail of a pinky, she would have taken the scissors to him, all of them. Family dog be damned. Well, hi. Professor Steverson.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the status of family and children law in the 1970s, early 80s? And maybe in answering that, you know, if you had any thoughts on the section I just read of this mother and her means of coping, and whether she violated what we now consider a duty to protect.
Yeah, so first, thanks for reading that, Joan. Having it read, I actually hate being read to for some reason. I prefer to read it myself. When I read that passage, but having you read it actually had it resonate more. So maybe I need to revisit my hatred of being read to. But the first thing that you said actually resonated with me in a totally different way. And that's, I'm one of 7 as well.
Oh,
7 kids, 6 girls, 1 boy. So Tim, my brother could commiserate with you. But in thinking about that, I struggle with the book a lot, as we talked about. But one thing that I can say is I think we forget that it's relatively recently that we even protect children from parents, let alone strangers. And as you and I talked about, Joan, it was in 1874 that the first child abuse case was brought, and it was brought by the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, which ties in nicely with the segment that you read. And then it wasn't until the 1960s that national attention was brought to child abuse by parents. Prior to that point, though, parents in the 1920s, the US Supreme Court had decided cases granting parents constitutional rights to the care, custody, and control of their children. And so you have that where the parents and the family have the right to do as they will, and then coupled with that, society's belief that the family was inviolate and that parents are always acting in the best interest of the children. And you can see how we have situations where children are not being protected. Nowadays, I actually was, because this isn't my area of research, but I was looking up failure to protect statutes and laws where parents are held in some instances criminally liable for failing to protect their children from neglect or abuse by others. But those statutes aren't without criticism. And one reason that they're criticized is, like a lot of statutes, they're actually used to punish those who are already marginalized. And so I'm always telling students, be careful about those statutes you want to enact, because they're the first people that are going to be prosecuted are going to be the folks who are marginalized. And in these instances, it's women who are battered themselves by their abusers, who are then charged with failing to protect their children. And so
unstable.
I think somebody's thing is unstable.
okay.
So it's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I talked about mothers and what they do, and my family being a Catholic family, your family being a Catholic family, but a very different Catholic family, in the sense that my parents converted to Catholicism. And so there wasn't the belief in the church being, well, my mom thinks the church is invincible, but she recognized that the humans in the church are not so much, and she'll take them on in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think we were saying, I grew up in a city where I could take the L into this city by myself at 10, and you weren't allowed to go alone anywhere.
Yeah, and I lived in upstate New York. We were in the country.
I won't say our ages, but we're pretty darn close in age.
We are.
So yeah, the failure to protect, when I think back on Tim's story, or maybe my story, being able to get on an L, even, to go into the city. Let me add this. I adopted my daughter from the state, and an issue in removing a child is, abandonment, neglect, failure to protect. So I've seen the movement from 1979. We don't even, protect what? I gave him a roof. I paid for his Catholic school. I fed him to a time now where, in a different degree of conduct, my daughter's birth parents lost their child. I wish we had the Wayback Machine, but we don't. You had told me the story. Can you repeat it about the going upriver?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm on the board for a local nonprofit law firm, and I know you all are like, there's no such thing. Yes, there is. There is a nonprofit law firm called Youth Rights and Justice, and they represent children in delinquency and dependency, also in school, because lots of the prison to school pipeline begins with expulsion and suspension. Anyhow, when I would give the speech for the gala for Youth Rights and Justice, I told this story that I had learned about the river. And some of you have probably heard the story, but there's a village and the people are working near the river, and they see a baby floating down the river. And so everybody rushes to the river to grab the baby. And then there's another baby in the river, and they go and they grab the baby, and soon there are lots of babies, and everybody in the village is at the river grabbing the babies to try and protect them. And one villager says, starts to leave, and they said, "Where are you going? We need everyone here to protect the babies coming down the river." And the villager said, "I'm going upriver to figure out who's throwing the babies in the river." And so part of it is, yes, we have to be reactive, but we also have to be proactive and looking at the laws and looking at our policies, and in fact, looking at our culture in terms of what systems, what policies, what beliefs do we have in place that allow our children to be thrown into the river. And you, Joan, were talking about some of the proactive things that you and Tim are part of.
Well, yeah, Tim, can you talk about your latest mission and how that ties in how you guys are going upriver?
Well, yeah, moving forward, basically, I was placed on the board of directors of it's the fastest growing non-for-profit in North America right now. It's called Survivors for Change. Abuse can be in many forms, from physical to sexual to physical and mental. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a child. It can be an adult, it can be a senior. What we're going to do is try to educate families on what to possibly look for, how predators groom, educate a family on, always questioning. Obviously, closing the door is a terrible idea. And simple things like that. But, it's something that, and then obviously helping survivors. That's our biggest concern, is making sure survivors have the education and the help and the outlet of talking about and what triggers them, and helping them grieve and work through their anger. And obviously, what I would love to see it do is actually go after organizations, governments, federal, municipal, that give these abusers a break, and sweep the stories under the rug. In even professional sports, we're seeing now, they need to be held accountable. And if we go at them with thousands of survivors, I don't think they're going to have much choice but to address our needs.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good mission. All that,
Very good.
all that discussion, can I take us back in time? And then I don't know if questions are coming up, Michael, feel free to pop in. But I was thinking about what you said, Professor, and what Tim was saying, putting us back in that context of time. And it reminded me of the women in this book. I didn't read the selections to you, but what was pretty obvious in our parish is all the children knew something was wrong. I mean, I wasn't the only kid standing out the door. I can't tell you how many texts and emails I've gotten from classmates saying, I knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. But the parents, the faculty, the staff, I can't say they didn't know something was wrong, because if the kids could pick it up, why couldn't they? But what could it have been about their lack of empowerment in the 1970s and 80s, or even their respect for hierarchy within the Catholic Church, that kept them from being a voice for their children? And I don't know, as a Catholic or someone who's read the story, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's what I struggle with in the book. Yeah, and maybe that's a cultural thing. Like I said, my mom would have had no trouble taking. Well, my mom did. My mom picketed the New York State Police, and then eventually they sued the New York State Police for discrimination. So people were like, "Don't mess with my mom." But depending on how you're raised, and as you said, when I was reading the book, if you have generation after generation after generation where you're told that you are less than and that your voice doesn't matter, right? And not only time after time after time, you're told the church is everything and invincible. If you put those two together, you can see, or I can see, or I'm trying to see, how somebody can not feel as though they have the right to speak up, but if they do speak up, will they even be heard?
Right.
And it's something that I've had to learn in working sometimes with our students, and particularly our students who identify as female, of you're in law school to get a voice. You have to use it because socialization for a lot of women is you don't speak up.
Right. That just ties into this story. Guess what is in the book of there was witness sexual abuse of a boy. The priest got all dressed up, put on aftershave, was in the rectory kind of looking out the window, and the boy showed up and the priest shuffled him down to the basement of the rectory. And there were two women, both whose husbands had died, both raising kids, who were upstairs in the main floor of our rectory in the office, realizing something was very, very wrong. One of them went downstairs and definitely saw what was sexual abuse of a child. And when I was speaking to the woman, the other woman, and she was even grappling with why she did nothing. She said, well, one, I needed my job. I was raising 4 kids. But secondly, who's going to listen to me in this hierarchy of priests? So that not only pulls in being female, but the entire Catholic structure, which the premise of my book goes back to the rewriting, or the writing, I guess, the first writing of the books, the epistles to Timothy, which say women should not speak. Women should not teach. Women shall be modest. If you're young and your husband dies, you better remarry. Don't cause trouble. All these admonitions against women. And the religious scholars looking at that said 2 things. Well, one, Apostle Paul did not write this because it was written 200 years after he died. And that's the same apostle who said, with God, there's neither slave nor free, no female nor male. I know I'm forgetting something, but we are souls. We're not identities. But the other reason this happened is that women were doing the teaching. Women were consecrating. Women were gathering people to their church to spread this message. And something happened when, I guess, the Pope became, the emperor became Catholic, or Christian, excuse me. I don't know even when anyone became Catholic, to take that power from the woman and put it in the emperor, and hence similarly up the papal hierarchy. So I think we go back a long, long, long way, and women, at least in the Catholic Church, haven't had a voice since 300 AD. Now, granted, I have an aunt who was a nun for 70 years, and a lot of people on this phone were taught by nuns who kind of led, under the light, but we still can't say mass. We are, as a woman, are disqualified from turning bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. Why? So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. This is where I struggle with how I remain Catholic, when it's just such a, I know Tim's answer to it, but any thoughts on any of those subjects?
Well, yeah, I think that's probably a bigger conversation. I mean, because I struggle with that as well. And even though I go to mass, maybe I'm not truly Catholic, and I think maybe my priest would say I'm not, because I'm not following the teachings. But there are, like I said, in our church, one of our a 77-year-old parishioner stood up to our deacon, who was saying something with which she disagreed, and she said, "You're lying." I mean, stood up in church during the homily. "You're lying," right? And so maybe I have hope that things will change if I stay. But Joan, you have some questions in the chat. I saw them popping up.
Yeah, I'd be happy to ask. Maureen had a good question. Is it too personal to ask if you ever asked your mom why she clipped you out? What did that mean to you? That it didn't happen, or we won't talk about it? If it's too personal, no, don't need to respond. I just found that so fascinating. I see it as a cultural Irish way to not talk about it.
It's not too personal. It intrigued me. I never asked her, well, here's what I did. I said, why did Dad cut me out of the photo album? And she said, looking down, it wasn't your father, it was me. And that threw me for a loop. So that caused more internal consternation. But Maureen, why did I even ask her why she cut me out? I instead did my own internal monologue of that my mother likes clean. My mother likes straight. My mother likes something that doesn't complicate. So a second bride complicates a wedding album when she gets divorced. A priest who abused her son complicates her picture of the Catholic Church. So she clings to a newspaper clipping of John Paul II saying that there's no place for abusers in the Catholic Church when they're all over there. And I was going to see a priest who was still a priest. I see some of my siblings on the phone. I don't know if they had any thoughts on it, or Tim. How do you have any thoughts on how mom kind of snipped her way to?
I think it's most likely her way of taking away the pain. That's what I think. Out of sight, out of mind. It's a fairly simple way of looking at it, but my mom was simple like that, intelligent but simple. She essentially didn't want to have those photos to remind.
Yeah, I remember driving with mom to, her stove had died and she needed to get a new one. And my dad was pretty much bedbound. And we picked out a stove. She didn't want anything fancy. We got like a $400 stove. And driving back, I don't know how the subject turned to Tim. And oh, I know how it happened. My friend had come over with some picture with film that had been put on a DVD of us as kids. And there was a picture of Tim laughing and having fun in the pool. And Tim saw that and he ran out of the house. And you told me at the time you couldn't see yourself as a child happy. That's why you left.
Mhm.
But I asked my mom about that. And she said, I haven't talked to him because he's got a wife and he's got a kid and he's got a job. I think he's doing okay. Simple. And let us say we love our mom. We miss our mom. She had a lot of great qualities. And it hurts to put my parents on the altar. But for this story to make a difference, they have to be.
We have a question from Linda Quigley. Joan and Tim, please talk about how your respective relationships to the Catholic Church changed as a result of Tim's abuse finally coming to light.
You want to go first?
Oh,
Yeah.
my relationship
With
with
the Catholic Church.
with the Catholic Church is, I don't believe there is a Catholic Church. It does not exist, period. What I see as, what other people see as the Catholic Church, I see as a drug cartel. I simply think that from Satan all the way down to the Pope, and I put Satan at the top. Everyone else in the Catholic Church is below Satan.
Not the laity, right? The priests and the.
Anyone that protects and houses
Okay.
and allows these people to go about their business, to me, I'm done with you. The way I look at God, I have a great relationship with God. I can be mad at God. I can swear at God. I can threaten God. We have that type of relationship. I essentially think that the church the church was ruined by man. So I simply took the middleman out of the equation.
And I stayed to the best degree possible. Now, Tim's lived with this his entire life. My life changed on a subway call from him in 2002 at a time that I had lived close to 40 years, and the Catholic Church had been a source of comfort for me. I had a spiritual mentor during my divorce who, let me know that I was never alone. I developed a really strong relationship with my God. And I do believe in the transubstantiation of the host and the wine into the body and blood of Christ. And to believe that and to receive it, I need to go to Mass. Now, I can tell you, I can't take everything else that goes with it, which is why I can't put my daughter in Catholic school, which is why I would shiver to see her even, perhaps in a youth group with a priest. I can't stand going to Mass and not hearing a prayer for all the victims of clergy sex abuse. I can't stand how people don't want us. They don't want to be remembered, the pain. They want to cut, snip, just like my mom. But I also can't live without it, which is why I go, which is why I sneak in when my soul wants it. It's usually every 3 or 4 months. And Janet, can I bring you into this discussion? I mean,
Sure.
yeah.
What's the
Well,
question?
what do you think of the Catholic Church? You said that we're called, I guess, cafeteria Catholics because we pick what we believe. At least I do. I don't think men are better than women. I don't
Right.
have opinions about lots of hosts of things that I'm not supposed to post on. But you still go to church, right? Is there a
And
reason?
I think so I tried going to other churches, but my formative years were with the Catholic Church. And the difficulty with going to other churches is that there's a different structure and it doesn't feel the same. And so I actually don't, so there's a lot that I disagree with the Catholic Church. I'm closer to Tim in that, in thinking about God and the dictates, and that I feel that the Catholic Church, actually most religions have ruined it, that, they stepped in and, something as simple as love one another as I have loved you, just gets swept away in the, you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do this. And by the way, a lot of what you have to do is stuff that benefits us. And so I go to Mass to remind myself that I'm not here for me.
Okay.
And it's that ritual that reminds me that I'm not here for me and the people there. I'm on the finance committee, and they do good work with the food pantry and all of that kind of stuff. And I just need, I know Tim doesn't need that reminder, but I need that reminder sometimes of why I'm here.
And I'm the same. I tried to go to other denominations and it just didn't work. So
yeah. But I keep fighting against it. And my favorite church actually is my sister's church, which my mom says is not Catholic.
okay.
And the reason it's not Catholic is because the priest was excommunicated for marrying same-sex couples. And then the nun, who then later became a priest, was also excommunicated. And so after they were excommunicated, the whole congregation was like, so we're leaving the Catholic Church and we're doing our own thing over here and trying to live. And that's my favorite place to go. It's so inclusive. The pastor is a woman. It's the kids are involved. It's just the most uplifting place to go.
And all the Catholic songs are there, I imagine.
You're right. So it's got the good part.
Yeah.
And they excise maybe they just snip, snip, snip and excise all the bad parts.
I want to hear more about that later.
We have a question from Julie Sullivan about the statute of limitations. Why is there such a thing, especially in the Catholic Church? What is the time limit now? Has it changed? How can it be changed?
I think let me jump in here. So statutes of limitation have been around since ancient Greece. I think in ancient Greece, there are about 30,000 citizens, and every citizen had a right to have a peer group of about 250 people resolve disputes. And one of the main reasons, one things they had to do was to act quickly, because the idea of not acting quickly meant you didn't think it was serious enough. So it started from that perspective, the boiling blood. We need you hot with a vengeance. My understanding with English jurisprudence is that it took that principle, but it also recognized for all of us, there has to be a time in our lives where we can stop looking in the rearview mirror, where our mistakes of the other day won't be chasing us. That said, there are exceptions. You know, you hear about the cold cases and the people tried with murder. You hear now in nearly every state, I want to make sure I get this right, that the statutes of limitations do not apply to child sex abuse, because in reality, most people don't have the ability to even realize they're drinking and taking drugs and in prison at age 30 because they were abused at age 5. So it's such a long period of time to keep, to prevent that ability to punish the offender. Unfortunately, when Tim and the other boys were abused, the statute of limitations in Illinois was until they were 21. That's when they had to report it. Tim was 35. So Mr. Ormachet, we don't call him by the other name, got to leave the country. I think he left the country because there is another victim who could still put him in prison, because under Illinois statutes, that statute told when the priest left the state of Illinois, and that was a long time ago. So it's always been, you know how I kind of went to Rome. I still try to get that person to come forward. Not very different from what's happening with Cardinal McCarrick, you know, in the trial, his criminal trial in Boston. That abuse happened in 1975. And first I was like, boy, why are they going after that guy for so long? But then I read the McCarrick report, and I have absolutely no problem with prosecuting an 87-year-old man for what he did to that child in 1972.
Do we have other questions from folks?
I think we've done pretty well.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Joan, I have a question. So as I told you, I'm probably about a third of the way through the book because I've been grading. But
yeah.
So I understand why Ormachet fled, but why did the Catholic Church give him sanctuary?
Boy, when I figure out the answer to that question, I think we won't have a Catholic Church anymore. The company line is, in 2002, Tim and 3 other now men came forward with credible accusations, and the Illinois state's attorney believed them, said that they would prosecute, but for the criminal statutes of limitations. The church then took the position that yes, we will remove him from pastorhood because he was a pastor in a church in Kentucky at the time. So they took him out of that. But then they were with the perspective, we have to remove him from any facility where there's a child. So their answer was to send them to the general curia in Rome. And I don't know about you, Janet, but I'm pretty sure there are children in Rome. And I can tell you, after sitting at a playground less than 300 yards from where he lives, with high windows looking down, his mind can still do whatever he does to get him where he's going. They say it's the only place he could go. They also say he gets to stay a priest, which I still can't understand. I mean, he can't have a public ministry, but he's still there in the hierarchy. I won't ruin the story, but one thing that gave me great comfort after talking to him was when he told me he didn't speak Italian, because that prevented him from not only his first category of grooming were parents. So if he couldn't go and groom the parents, then he couldn't get to the child. So I had great relief at that point. Not to say there aren't other ways he couldn't have been acting, but his main modus operandi was taken from him. And
Okay.
he's 80 plus, and as Tim says, as happy-go-lucky as someone who believes they are forgiven and who's forgiven
Yeah.
themselves can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one other question in the chat.
Yes, Linda. Joan, please talk a little bit about your writing process for the book.
Oh. Can I give the long answer? Do we have enough time?
Go ahead. Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. And if some of you heard this before, I'm sorry, but I'll try to pep it up. In 2002, 4 men came forward, at least 3 followed. Tim became a father, not once, but twice. Got to the point where he was ready to resolve his case, and they resolved the case civilly. And anyone who's an attorney on the phone knows that when you resolve something through a settlement agreement, there's that line that says, even though we're compensating you, there's no admission of wrongdoing or liability. This cannot be used against us in that kind of way. We're giving you the money, but we're not saying we did it. So imagine how that feels to a victim of clergy sex abuse. Imagine how that felt to Tim. Imagine how that felt to at least the 6,000 probably adults in this country, if not more, who have signed settlement agreements with all the archdioceses. It's got to be more. I used to know that number. What if France was 300,000 people being abused from over the last 70 years? We got to be pretty high up there as well. So being an overprotector, which my friends even noticed that I was at lunch today with my brother, so I got to work on that. I said, well, let's tell your story. And I always wanted to be a writer. I called myself the Laura Ingalls Wilder of Chicago. I wanted to write about a wonderful family in a city because I thought I had a wonderful family. So I took about 3 years trying to write his story. And at a certain point in that process, realized I can't tell his story. The only story I could tell was my own. And there's this thing called, I'm a secondary victim. If anyone has tried to help or protect someone that they love who's been abused, and you feel like you can't do anything about it, your world's been shaken too. So I started writing about my secondary victimhood and my desire to protect and parent when I'm not the parent, and confront when I was protecting or trying to protect Tim, was I really trying to protect the fragile parts of me that were also hurt? So with all that going in thought, I realized that was the story, but then I also realized I'm a lawyer. I can write briefs. I do have this poetic kind of oratory style, so I love words. I love lyric. I think I can write creatively as well, but I knew I needed a degree. So that's when I went off and got my MFA and learned how to write by reading great people like Eva Salidas, Sherry Simpson, Judith Barrington. And when I wrote about this in the master's thesis for my MFA, and it was only on a night of the Chinooks, if you got into that part of the book, Janet, when I realized the story wasn't done, because there's another part of me that's still not done, which is go to the source, go confront. So once we got back from Rome, the story could be told. And that's the story you have in front of you.
Cool.
Any thoughts on any of that, Tim? I mean,
No.
having your story in the world like that?
I haven't really had that consideration. I think it's important if it, helps another survivor realize that it's okay to face it head on, let people know what happened. It definitely helps myself with the grieving stage. I don't grieve about it anymore. I mean, the worst part of my situation now would be the post-traumatic stress syndrome. If it triggers me in any way, it's uncontrollable. Anger management, obviously, my hypersensitivity of protecting my children. I mean, my parents had 10 or 11 grandchildren, and the only two that never stayed at grandma and grandpa's house was my kids, because the thought of me leaving them at a house where parents that let me be abused would throw me into a panic. Things like that. So if there's one thing that could help another survivor realize that it's okay to talk about it and address it, I'm okay with, sharing my story.
Thanks. There is another question, but we're a little long on time. So maybe Krista, you can get in touch with the author, or perhaps Janet. It looks like a legal history question. Thanks everyone so much for coming. The recording, as much as there is, sorry, I got a late start on that. I'll put that up on our YouTube channel later this evening, and you can let people know to go there if they missed the event and watch it there. Thank you so much to the presenters. It's really, really great story. Really wonderful of you to share it with everyone
Michael,
here tonight.
Can I make one pitch for the audience, which is to please support Annie
Yes.
Blooms? If you don't buy my book, buy another book. It's a lovely store. You can buy online and in person. Independent bookstores are what matters.
I
Thank
would
you. And I
second
threw that
that.
link in there one more time. So yeah, you can click on that.
I love Annie Blooms.
Thanks,
So
Janet.
even if you don't live in Oregon, I see people who don't. Check out their website.
Yep, we can ship it to you. Yeah,
All
I can do that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
No, that's great. That's the best interruption ever. Thanks so much again, and have a good night, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
bye.